right, so before we head out to lunch, we just have one more announcement for you. At the 2014 Translation and Transmission Conference, we announced the creation of an award for excellence in translation. In the intervening years, we've brought that award to life through the hard work of an anonymous committee of wonderful and experienced translators, scholars, and editors. There are similar awards for excellence throughout the world of translation, writing, and publishing, and we believe that the growing community of Tibetan translators will benefit from an award that recognizes professional excellence in our specific field. This conference is partly about honoring excellence in translation and honoring all of your work. We hope that this award will exert a positive influence on the field of Tibetan translation moving forward as Buddhism is further established in the Western world. The winners of these awards were chosen by 12 experts. They're renowned specialists in Tibetan language who took part as an anonymous review committee, as I said. We provided them with a very, very large list of all book-length published translations of Tibetan texts into English, specifically, between the years 2012 and 2015. 111 in all. This list was then reduced to a short list of 28, and then voted upon and reviewed, and again, a short list was created of 12 books that were reviewed in extreme detail. Each book was read and reviewed by each committee member and rated on values such as quality of word choice, overall flow of text, translation accuracy, perceived importance of the contribution to the field, and 8 other measures. To the winners, I just want to say thank you for your hard work. I think that the work you do is important, and whether you like it or not, you're going to be transmitting Buddhism through these books for many, many years. So thank you so much for that hard work, but also for your example to all of us, because I want to point out the excellence in each of your work. It really is meaningful to me, and I think to everyone here who has no doubt read your works. So to the anonymous committee, I'd also like to thank you very much for your efforts to award the first Shantarakshita Award for Excellence in Translation. Now, to present the awards, I'd like to ask Eric Colombel to come up to the stage. Thank you. So, do you want to read them out?
No, you're going to read it. I mean, the only thing I had to do for the whole thing, besides reading most of the books, which I do anyway, so that was not such hard work for me, that Marcus asking me, oh yeah, award, what are you going to give them? I'm like, are we going to give them a plaque? Are we going to give them some, plastic thing? Or, or another statue or something like that. But before I move to that, Sydney was supposed to actually give the award. Sydney was the founder of Snowland Publications, and since I started the foundation, we worked very closely together. So I thought it was rightly so for him to do that, but unfortunately, because of health issue, he can't do it, so I have to do it. So we dropped the plaque and the carpet and everything else, and we went for the Prajnaparamita in 8,000 verses. So
the third place winner for the translation of the life story of Ra Lotsawa Dorje Drak, the All-Pervading Melodious Drumbeat, published with Penguin Classics in 2015, Bryan J. Cuevas. The second place winner for the translation of the second volume of Jigme Lingpa's classic text, The Treasury of Precious Qualities, with detailed commentary by Kangye Rinpoche, published with Shambhala Publications in 2014. the Padmakara translation groups Wulstan, Fletcher, and Helena Blankeleder. And finally, the first place winner for the translation of Jetson Kapa's teachings on the Guhya Samaja Tantra, A Lamp to Illuminate the Five Stages, published with Wisdom in 2013, Gavin Kilty.
Eric, Andrea, Marcus, and the Anonymous Review Committee, thank you so much for awarding me this. Very pleased. And may I just echo a little bit of what Anthony said this morning about Tsadra as a foundation. I just take this opportunity, I think on behalf of translators, scholars, students everywhere, to thank you, Tsadra, for what you do. You're sponsoring activities around the world, students, scholars, publications. I think what you've done is a little short of remarkable, and I want to take this opportunity to personally thank you. Okay. There's a sutra I remember reading somewhere where at the end, the dedication was, may, lots of may the bodhisattvas achieve them, may the Buddhas, and may the monks, and may the laymen. And right at the end is, may the sponsors have long lives. And so we want sponsors to have long lives, right? So when I received the email telling me that I'd won this award, it was late at night. It was about midnight, and I have this really stupid habit of checking my emails before I go to bed. But I suspect I might not be alone there. So I opened the email. I was tired. I was bleary-eyed, and I started reading, and dear Gavin, and then you think, pleased to announce you have won and this award, And my first thought, honestly, was, this is one of these Nigerian scams. I'm sorry, but it was my first thought, and But then I saw Marcus's name at the bottom, so I thought, I realized it was genuine. And I have to say, my reaction was I was emotional. I mean, I don't usually do emotional, but I felt overwhelmed, and if you say in England, chuffed. I don't know if you know that word, but it's a good English word. And I was so emotional. So I remember I ran next door, just where Jackie, my wife, was, and she was sensibly sleeping. So I went up to her and I said, "Wake up, wake up!" She said, "Well, go away, I'm sleeping," or words to that effect. I said, "Wake up! I've won something." She said, "What? I've won something, So. That's the state I was in, and I didn't sleep much that night. Anyway, the next morning I'd calmed down a bit, and I immediately thought of two people that I needed to thank, and I've already thanked them, but I want to do it publicly here. The first one is Thupten Jinpa, president of the Institute of Tibetan Classics, who I work for primarily. And it's no exaggeration to say that when he took me on and asked me to become a translator, it changed the course of my life. I can really say that because I gave up the day job, I stopped teaching, and I became a full-time translator, which I am to this day. And I get up every morning, and I love it. I think it's the best job, in the world. And despite what may have been said earlier, I do learn on the job. I mean, you do learn as you go along, and it is, I find it endlessly rewarding. And so, I feel that this award is maybe a vindication of the choice I made to become a translator. So I need to thank Jinpa for putting his trust in me. The other person is the editor at Wisdom, David Kittelstrom, who I've had the pleasure of working with since early 2000. And all translators need editors, right? And he has this extraordinary ability to take the sort of banal, long, incomprehensible, long-winded sort of sentences that I produce and to turn them into a beacon of clarity. And if there is any clarity in this book, a lot of it is down to David. And I would, so I publicly would like to acknowledge David here. And Wisdom Publications as a publishing house. I find, their work, someone talked about the aesthetics of the visual appreciation of a text, and I've always found, their publications to be stunning visually, the right font, everything. So that's good. So I'd like to thank you. There's a third person or group that I would like to thank, and that is the great Tibetan masters who, over the course of the past 1,000 years, have produced and developed the monastic curriculum, that of Tari, Luri, Tari, Pachin, Uma, Ze, and so forth. That is taught in the monastic academies. I'm thinking primarily of the Guluk because that is the one that I've studied in, but the same curriculum is found throughout the other traditions too. And I was very fortunate to be able to study this curriculum, not in its full term, but I managed to study 8 years in the Institute of Buddhist Dialectics in Dharamshala in the early 70s. And I know 8 years is nothing compared to what it takes to become a Laurent Bekeshe, which is 12, 16, 20 years or something. But in those 8 years, that is what was being offered, and I went through that. And the reason I want to thank this tradition of study in terms of my translation is because, not necessarily because of the knowledge that you get from it, but this may sound a bit strange, but it taught me how to think. Not that I didn't think before, but it taught me how to think properly. And I can honestly say that is valuable. What do I mean by this? Well, just give me a story. Several years ago, in the early 2000 and something, a young Tibetan monk friend of mine, very bright, well-educated, good English speaking monk, said to me, "Gavin, what are you translating these days?" And I said, "Well, I'm doing this overview of Kalachakra, ornament of stainless light by Kirabnos and Gyatso." And he said, "Oh, do you practice Kalachakra?" I said, "No." He says, "Well, how can you translate it?" I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, you can't translate something you don't have experience of, So I thought, well, that kind of rules me out of almost anything because so much, I think this came up earlier this morning, so much of what we translate is to do with advanced states, qualities of the Buddha, enlightened abilities of the the Buddha able to speak all languages simultaneously, powers attained by the great Siddha masters, the profound explanation on emptiness, and in this book that in the 5 stages, I mean, it deals with the Guhya Samaja completion stage, and so it goes through the 3 isolations, the illusory body, the set and sungju, union. Not to mention the whole process of bringing the winds into the central channel and into the various chakras and the tumo. All things a million miles away from my experience. So I think, he had a point, a bit of a point there. And I think this question did come up this morning. Someone asked this question. He has a point. And I was thinking about it, and I thought, how do I answer that? Well, fortunately for us, we have 2 great Indian masters, Acharya Dignala and Acharya Dharmakirti, who presented their works on Sama, Pramana, and who told us that there are 2 ways of knowing, two Sama, right? There's the direct experience, access to that is accessible to the 5 senses. That's one way of knowing. And the other one is the conceptual understanding, the conceptual process of learning through reasoning to come to an understanding and a comprehension of that which is hidden from us, Tibetan talk about, the Shelja Toba, you get it, you get whatever it is, you're searching for. The culmination of which, of course, is the Jepak Sama, the inferential cognition, which is necessarily of something that is not immediately accessible to the senses. It is hidden from us. And so therefore, the way that we approach it, or the way that we go to it, is through this conceptual route. And so this particular way of understanding, which Dharmakirti talks about, from the one to the many and from the many to the one. From the one to the many, he means that from the one is the Rangsemba, the immediately accessible phenomena of the world. And starting with that is accessible, starting with that, you then, through a process of, isolates and dokpa, you can reason upwards from the accessible to the hidden phenomena contained either within that phenomena or beyond it, using analytical reasonings and the process of separating out conceptually various parts of that. And by using the power of reasoning and thinking, which is also taught in the first chapter, one can come to an understanding, Rangi Shelja Toba, of something that is not immediately apparent within the Rangsemba at the beginning. Like Mitakpa is everywhere, right? Subtle impermanence is everywhere, but we don't see it. It's not immediately experienceable by the senses. And so through that particular way, I'm not saying that these great advanced attainments and qualities of the Buddha, that translators can always get some kind of inferential cognition of them. That would take forever, and it's quite difficult. But I do believe that through thinking and beginning with something that is immediately accessible, which in our case is the mind, or the lung, if you tell me the illusory body is primarily lung, right? By beginning with those in the mind and the everyday experience that we have, and using that as the starting point, and then conceptualizing or analyzing, in the realm of thought, one can at least approach some kind of understanding where you may not actually have your Shelja Toba, but you may get a yichi or something that approaches it. And I think that when you get that, that actually helps you to understand it. And that aids translation, because you've somehow gotten in touch with something that is hidden normally, which you have to translate and find a word for. And I think that's a very useful way of translating, by going to that route, coupled with other methods, such as obviously going to the Sanskrit derivation, which we talked a lot about, etymology, usage, in other ways. You put these two together. I found that this particular way of thinking helps me a lot when I'm coming to some difficult terminology that I have to find English word for, like ose, you know. So when I say that the training, dialectic training and debate and so forth, taught me how to think, that's what I mean. It taught me how to think. It taught me how to tackle a text. And it also provides me with a kind of gorim, you know, a kind of sequence. I can do this and this and this and this. It's kind of regimented, yeah. Maybe my sem is not so dulwa, but maybe a little bit dulwa by you know, training in the dialectical method has a little bit of a taming and discipline of the mind. So I do feel that is why I want to thank those great masters who have developed that curriculum, because I feel that, you know, I was once, one of my classmates is a Geshe, you know, Geshe Damdrul, who's now in Atlanta, Georgia. And I was having lunch with him in Saranath, and I said, you know, I feel that my 8 years at the Seni, we called it Seni Trasang in those days, was the most valuable of my life. And he said, yeah, I feel exactly the same, you know? So I feel a debt of gratitude to that tradition. And in one person in particular, the then principal of the IBD. I'm going to get emotional. Ken Lawson Gyatso, who is no longer with us, as you know. But, you know, I went to see him, this long-haired layman, you know, one day in his office, and I asked him, you know, could I join his school? And he could have said, no, you're not a monk, get out of here, you know, or this is for Tibetans only, you know. But he didn't. He said, yeah, sure, Sani sure. He said, come tomorrow, start tomorrow, just like that. And then get on. He started and got on with his work, you know, just like that, you know. And these days, you know, there's a waiting list at the IBD, a waiting list of Westerners trying to get in. So I would like to dedicate this to him.